Hello, Alexandra here. Today I'm going to talk about the pitfalls of stage yellow or stage teal in integral. This video is for stage green folks interested in moving to stage yellow, especially if you are maxing out stage green. You might wonder, well, what are some of the pitfalls of yellow? Because I've been saying in my earlier videos that yellow is such an easy stage, so let me talk about a couple of the advantages before I talk about some of the pitfalls you can expect or might expect. So yellow is more of an individualist stage. So yellow is not as sensitive as stage green and has a little bit, maybe not as much as stage orange, but is a little bit made of Teflon, so it's kind of easier to navigate through life. The externals, ups and downs, don't bother you as much because yellow is so excited about their life and their interests, and they've spent a lot of time at green kind of becoming even more authentic. So yellow, when you get to stabilized in yellow, you're pretty on track with your life. You know who you are, and you're just enjoying the richness of your life. And yellow does have a lot of insight because a lot of stage yellow either intuitively realizes there's sort of been stages or phases that have happened throughout life. A lot of times stage yellow will just get online and eventually find spiral dynamics or integral and be immediately interested in the stages because this is the first stage where they can look back and see where they've been. This is very useful in having the tools to communicate across boundaries, to be able to communicate to a lot of different stages successfully. So in spiral dynamics, they call yellow flex flow because they can sort of flow around the spiral and flex themselves to communicate with any of the previous stages, and they sometimes are called spiral wizards because they can ride the spiral, not just in terms of communication, but if they need to pull out some tools from red, healthy red, the audacity and the confidence when they make big changes in their life, or lean on green when they want to be sensitive and be advocates and be politically correct and be empathetic. There's a very flexible, insightful stage. So it's a fun stage, and it's sort of transcended and included all of the empathy from green, but it's a very practical, solution focused stage, and yellows are quite good at solutions, more so in the previous stages, because according to the Spiral Dynamics book by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen, yellow has more capacities than all of the previous stages combined. Yellow really is an effective stage. And now what would the pitfalls be of that? That's really fun. When you start to max out yellow, here's maybe where a pitfall comes. Transitions are hard. Yellow, late yellow, very late yellow, very early turquoise, in that transitional phase, starts to realize there are few other people like them. And you can read this in Suzanne Cook-Greuter's PDF, The Wonderful 9 Levels of Increasing Embrace. So stage yellow there correlates with the strategist or autonomous stage, and maxing out stage yellow correlates with going into turquoise, which she calls the ego-aware stage. So when you read that PDF, you'll know where you are in terms of the stages. But she says at that point, when you start to get to late yellow, get into early turquoise, you realize there are a few other people like you, and it can be lonely. And you'll hear this in other videos too. You might hear it. I heard it on a video. I think it was a turquoise video by Chris at Shores of Infinity, that when you start to get late yellow, early turquoise, you really crave a community because you can be very lonely. This is definitely a pitfall. And not only that, at this point, you're practicing radical self-responsibility. So what happens is, at yellow, especially late yellow, you start to realize that the previous stages see you to varying degrees, and not everyone is going to see you in all of your complexities and capacities. So even folks at stage green, especially if they haven't studied the stages or watched the videos online, yellow might even be virtually invisible, or stage green might see 20%, 40%. So stage yellow needs to work to communicate across boundaries, and this constant invisibility can be lonely. However, yellow is very responsible about their shadow or doing parts work, and will simultaneously work to eliminate any childhood issues where they feel like they weren't seen, or any parts that feel like they're not seen, and really do the depth work to be able to actually transcend the being somewhat invisible to understanding. They've got to do the work first, that it's just so much more loving and useful to meet people where they are at, and to connect with people at their essence. So that is a journey that yellow has to go through. And not only that, yellow has to be really careful. Yellow is so optimistic and such a can-do stage, and yellow's been through stage green, so yellow knows green is perfectly capable of moving to stage yellow. But if you're going to go to stage yellow, this video and the content about moving to stage yellow is really useful for people who are maxing out stage green, for people who are exiting stage green. The people who are maybe more in the deep center of stage green, or stabilized in the middle of stage green, maybe if you're yellow and you're talking about the stages and you're talking about integral and spiral dynamics, your green friends may be politely listening to you and somewhat slightly waiting for you to move on from the topic, because yellow is the first stage that really, really passionately cares about the stages. Or if you're maxing out green, you may really benefit from this content and other videos online. So mid-stage green really just needs to be at, living at, and thriving in mid-stage green. So what happens, I've noticed in some integral groups, the conversations when there's a lot of greens are not as practical as if they were conversations that stage yellow is more interested in. Some of the integral groups I attend or have a majority of stage green folks in them. So, for example, these folks, actually some of them are quite articulate, and I would even say brilliant, and they're having these amazing discussions about the higher stages, like above coral and spiral dynamics, and stages like violet and up to clear light in integral. And it's a fascinating spiritual topic. In this recent discussion, it was quite amazing. We were talking about the difference between maybe what communion is at turquoise, and non-duality at the higher stages, and technical differences in with terms like the difference between sort of the universe being infinite versus boundless. Those are two different things, and this got so nuanced and so technical and got really esoteric. And there was so much intelligence and verbal dexterity going on in this discussion. But sometimes these discussions that greens really like go off into amazing directions, but they're not focused on the practical. Like stage yellow might want to just focus on how can we help to better solve the world's problems now. So green sort of mid-green, if they're going in the spiritual direction, actually needs to be at the searching and the seeking and the esoteric. And stage yellow might find that a little frustrating, but at stage yellow, you quickly realize, if you don't realize this is a pitfall at stage yellow, but you eventually figure out it is a bad idea to want other people to change. You will always be disappointed. Again, it's just much better to start meeting people where they're at and appreciating people and embracing people and communicating, appreciating a person's essence. Because yellows can be, one of the pitfalls is like a little too gung-ho, like, yeah, let's do it. Because in the next 10 years, according to Ken Wilber, probably 10 to 15% of the population will become at stage yellow. They'll move to stage yellow, which is going to cause a societal transformation. And so the people who are already centered in yellow might be a little enthusiastic in wanting to pull their stage green friends along with them. And trying to take away the mid-stage greens can appear to yellow to be circling around and around and out, discussing all these topics, a breadth of ideas and not a depth of ideas, and not doing practical applications. But taking that away from stage green and trying to pull people forward is taking away an essential component of that stage. Be taking away the crucial part of mid-green is the seeking and the curiosity, and maybe not going too deep or practically applying things, but exploring and conversing and enjoying, maybe sometimes talking about esoteric spiritual topics they never will apply. And also stage green, let's be clear, it can be also very practical, because a lot of stage greens are activists and they're working as activists, and they're doing the protests. And stage yellow still needs to respect that stage green, especially mid-stage green, is at mid-stage green. Yes, stage green, when it moves to stage yellow, does become more effective. It does increase their complexities, does improve your capacities, it does improve your efficacy. You can do more in less time, and not just efficiently, but effectively. But yellow, sometimes you just need to let people in early green and mid green be. And yellow is, you just got to work on yourself radically. If you feel a little bit alone, or if you want to change somebody else, you got to go back to that parts work, got to go back to that shadow work. You've got to it is hard. It's hard to find a group where the whole group would be at stage yellow, or the majority of the group. That's coming maybe in 10 years when you have a larger percent of the population there. And it is definitely hard if you're maxing out stage yellow. It's definitely hard to find a group of turquoise folks. You probably won't find it, and you have to sort of rely on individuals who make videos, or there's individuals in integral groups who are past turquoise leading discussions, so you can get those resources, and you can hear what it's like with the internet and with integral groups. You're not going to be totally alone as far as learning and listening about stage turquoise if you're maxing out yellow. But it is a little more work, and it is harder because there are just fewer people at late yellow, fewer people at turquoise, and so forth. So exiting yellow can be pretty hard, because not only that, but the harder you try to exit yellow, here's another pitfall, and this is the last pitfall I'll talk about. The harder you try to exit yellow, the more you're going to stay stuck at yellow. You're going to be going around and around in circles in your intellect and trying, because turquoise is about letting go. It's about literally letting go of the identity and going somewhat into no self. So, whereas yellow might find green to be circling around too much and going from guru to guru, or spiritual experience to spiritual experience, Guess what, yellow? When we max out yellow, we have that, probably have that phase. I know I do. And I've talked to some coaches, and this is not uncommon for late stage yellow to just try too hard and circle around and try to get to the next stage using their intellect. Just doesn't work. What we all have in common, in the way yellow can get to turquoise, and the way green can get to yellow, and the way stages, everybody can move through the stages, is doing that parts work, doing the shadow work. That is the key, or else all of us are spiritual bypassing. So as it turns out, we're all in the same boat. I hope you found this information useful. Sending you love and blessings.